Hello, Jar of Marble dwellers and Jar of Marble curious. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to thee all. My name is Linda and this is Jar of Marbles. I hope that you've had a really good week. This week has been a good one for me. I've just got over a cold, so if I sound a little bit extra sexy, you'll know why. But this week I have been thinking about living in the past as a subject, just thinking on how it can attract sort of fairly negative connotations, and on the other hand it can be a really good thing. So I thought that I might just flesh it out a little bit and see if we can get to enjoy it a little bit, because as we get older our awareness of time alters. This can make us have a sense of time is passing faster. No matter how you spin it, life travels fast. We say to each other on a consistent basis, gee, time's going fast. Oh, I know. We go on to say, I can't remember winter. Is it Christmas already? Whatever happened to June? Whatever happened to June? Well, June was a few months ago, Bob. We say these kind of declarations all the time, every year, without fail, as though it's a new discovery. We all know that it's not, but it is often expressed, I believe, to all of us and by us. And if we don't live fully in a way that is meaningful, however that looks, we end up missing out or feeling like we have missed out, and probably on some fairly beautiful moments. When we're young, we're not aware of time, and yet we do get to a place in our life where we do wonder where it went. We are a funny bunch. Slowing down means we do have a better chance of savouring moments in time and not missing so much of our lives. In a way, we have been indoctrinated in busyness. In fact, our value to some cultures is linked directly to how busy you are. Work ethic is everything, and anything else takes a solid second place. And along the way, many of us become addicted to being busy. The measure can be if you are busy, then your life is successful. But who is doing the measuring? Whose standard is that? Is happiness a factor yet? Busy equals successful. That is one way it is measured. I am not sure that is how it works. If you're bouncing from one thing to the next, one event to the next, one project to the next, sometimes you can get so wiped out you may not even know if you're happy or even realise how busy you are. I have been there, and when I look back about how busy I have been, and I look back now and shudder, friends, professional musicians, corporates, putting their last drop of blood on the line, practicing behind the scenes, and 1,000 other implementations that have to happen. Third-party hold-ups and incompetency. There's a word for you, eh? Incompetency. That would make your toes curl. And then, where is the time to nurture friendships and personal relationships and the beautiful children? So much time wasted in other places. The spectator sees more than the player, meaning that you can see someone who's busy all the time and is telling you how busy they are, giving you a blow-by-blow description of just how busy they are, in case you don't believe them or in case you haven't noticed. So, as a spectator, you are watching the player. You have the full, uninterrupted view. And as a spectator, we may ask the question, how are they able to maintain that kind of life? And the question is asked because they look older or constantly stressed than they should. They never seem to be happy, clearly on overload, overwhelm all the time. They're drinking the Kool-Aid and most likely do not know that they are. The Kool-Aid is illusion, and it is easier to drink that than face another path. There always seems to be somewhere else they have to get to. They never seem to stop. They are rarely present with you, and when they are with you and when they do stop, quite often they can really feel down. It takes major things like an illness or a pandemic to slow them down, and that's many of us, right? So many of us were forced to stop and utilise time in a different way. I believe, just from reading and conversations had, that it wasn't just the introverts that relished in the pandemic, that people who were always busy to not being busy at all and unable to go anywhere, that it was great. And they were quite happy in their lockdown. They had real opportunity to know more than admit or suspect, but to know that their life needed to change in order to have a more meaningful life. Holding on to the past can look like busyness, and the reward that is often given is a bottle or two of wine, and then people can form alliances because they share that interest. But take away the poisons and you'll find it may be more easier to see that being busy is yet another cover for other things that have perhaps never been given the light of day. The past may have been partying, and after another 4 or 5 decades have passed, that may be quite difficult to have. We can never go back no matter how hard we try. If you fear that time is running out, you're not alone. Most of us are going to experience that feeling, and it may not even be real. It's not that you have more to do or places to go to, people to see, etc. Rather, it is the things you're wanting to do or have to are in conflict with one another. Right now, I'm putting in a lot of time with the podcast, for example, willingly and happily. I'm also painting canvases. And about the time I launched the podcast, I started making sales with my art. I have 2 books I have to edit. It was 1, now it's 2. The plan is to self-publish and other projects. And since all of that, I've been minding my grandson 5 days a week, happily. So at first glance, that could sort of look like a lot, and you could think, well, gee, there's a lot of conflicts there. But I have to find the time, which can be found in order to put in enough time for each project. And somewhere in between all of that, be in the moment, really love what I'm doing, feel inspired, and not feeling like I have to. I'm way past the have to. Nothing left in me for that. Literally been there, done that. Now I'm doing what I want. And as it stands, they are all ticking boxes, important boxes, like being challenged, being consistent, being around a beautiful baby boy, being creative and inspired. And do I feel fortunate? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, Bob. Right on, amigo. In truth, these are choices. And in between all of that is sleep, gardening, gym, getting to the hairdressers, going out for coffees, seeing my beautiful family, seeing my lovely friends, and writing and researching the scripts I write at least 4 days a week. Man, I am committed. But it is my choice. I'm doing nothing that makes me feel lost and is not healthy on any level. Not all day and every day. Doing nothing in between all of the above is also welcome and enjoyed. According to a recent study published in the Journal of Marketing Research, your stress may not be due to the number of hours you're busy in the day. Rather, it may be coming from the drama that is playing out in my to-do list. Reality check. Time is something we can manipulate and alter. And then on the other hand, time is not something we can manipulate or alter to our liking. We do, though. We have a choice. How we use time moving forward. Now, isn't this cut and dry, is it? There are just times when it's not, and we can't always find a balance. We are human, and it is part of the deal. But when we are feeling a bit more balanced and we are doing enough things that we enjoy and we feel like we are developing ourselves, there is a satisfaction in that. In the words of Charles Buxton, you will never find time for anything. If you want time, you must make it. So I asked myself, what is the ideal outcome that I want to achieve today as I walk into the studio? Prior to walking in, I've written notes, I've researched, I've decided on the tone, and then I go in with a semi-planned strategy. Sometimes those plans do not manifest. I go off on another tangent, and that is often exactly what is needed to happen. And I often do go off on tangents. I surprise myself, and I do like surprises. I'm super aware of being where it makes me feel happy and peaceful. My higher self has her finger on the pulse with what I'm doing every day in my life. It is interesting that creating this podcast has put me on track with my singing and songwriting. It has awakened that big part of me that went to sleep for what seems an age. It has come to my attention that if you are around the wrong people, it can gobble up your confidence and natural urges, and in my case, is to sing a lot. Before the podcast, I had all the time in the world, and I was doing next to nothing. Well, for me, doing next to nothing is probably a lot to a lot of people, but for me, didn't feel like I was doing anything that was really inspiring, and I just didn't feel inspired. And I think that was what was behind me not pulling my finger out and getting on with it. But also I didn't have the gear that I have now either, and which has opened up this world. It did take me having to learn a lot of new skills in order for me to do this. In the past, I've always had people to do things for me. And when I say the past, I mean, quite some time ago, whether it was putting new strings on my guitar and tuning the guitar, both of which I can do. But I never realised it was a thing. And then I stopped singing for a long time. I actually forgot that I could, and no one asked me to sing, and it was as if I had rendered myself invisible, mostly unconsciously, but nonetheless I was living in the past in certain areas, and it wasn't serving me. Of course, there are many other slithers in that sphere of what makes us, but that was sure something that required being exposed. So the end result of all of that is I feel so grateful that I get to do this, and there's still much to do and create, and I am thrilled to know that I'm nowhere ready to stop. It kind of reminds me of when I opened up my first cafe when I didn't know how to cook. That is true. If you've listened to any of my other podcasts, you'll know that is true. And I literally learnt on the job. And I feel the same with this podcast. I'm learning as I go. I decided I was going to give it a go. And I'm so glad that I didn't know what I didn't know, because it was a lot. So when I published episode 1, I knew it was fraught with imperfections and not as pretty as I would have liked it to have been. But I also knew if I didn't throw it out there, I'd be finessing for all time and never get started. It was kind of wild when I realised that I was repeating a pattern that led me to so much success and actual satisfaction and happiness, and not following a strict bulleted point business plan. I spent time looking after my nearly 10-month-old grandson. And it truly is a privilege, and we have such a gorgeous bond and always so happy to see each other. It made me feel like it felt like forever that anyone had looked at me and was just really glad to see me. It's true. It's actually true. I couldn't remember feeling so wanted. It's so neat to be back singing in the Wiggles children's songs as I was doing that 16 years ago with my youngest daughter, Carla. The Wiggles have been around now for over 30 years, and it is surreal to be singing them again. And I have my own dance routines, and I also do actions. I'm available for small parties. No, I'm not really. Oh, you do actions. Yes, I do, Bob. You should see me go. Now, living in the past can stop us from healing, and I had to address that. Without it even being an intention, it just came over me one day and made me realise that sometimes we can believe that some things are the same as they were in the past. And I think that when life is being harsh and we have our hands off the driver's wheel, we understandably can go somewhere, and usually the past, and maybe life was more pleasant, fun and free. It can come around to the idea of examining your life, and that is easier said than it's done, right? Oh, it's so easy. What would you know, Bob? You're not even real. And you can. The people who have avoided facing their life by the choices they're making, you can tell they're still living like they're 21 when they're in their 60s. And that's all good if you're happy and not hurting anyone, like your kids, for example. It only gets hard to look at if it's affecting people who care about you, and usually it's not in a very wholesome way. Being nostalgic is one thing, as is resisting change. If we're not enjoying and appreciating our present, people won't be able to let go of their past. Briefly, when we allow past mistakes to stay in the past, forgive yourself and don't let it continue to define you. Can be tricky if major fun and fantastic people and adventures happened in your past. I have had the most wonderful times in my life, and that's not to say that shitty things haven't happened. They have. Pretty ridiculously outrageous things, actually. And, I think, honestly, none of us get off scot-free. None of us get a free pass out of this life without things going terribly wrong. Now that I'm in my 60s, I see I have a bit of a past. Oh, Bob. That is to say, I've been a child. I've had my teens, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s and 50s, and now my 60s. That's a bit of a past in there. I've done some stuff and I know things, at least for me, through my own experiences, through my own eyes of my own life. And so have you. Remembering your past is fundamental to being human. Our personal memories give us a sense of continuity, the same person or sense of self moving through time, all providing important details of who we are and who we want to be. When we remember a past event, we not only recall the event, we also know that we experienced it. Our episodic memory allows us to become witnesses of the past and thus give testimony about it. If you read an old letter or newspaper article, hear an old song, an old saying you haven't heard for years, smell something, it might jog your memory. The ability to recall and reflect helps older adults to remember who they used to be in order to help them to find their identity in the current moment. The episodic memory allows you to mentally time travel back to an episode of your life and relive it in vivid detail. We all use our episodic memory. We use it to recall someone's name we met recently. It enables you to remember to take a detour along your usual route home if there's construction going on. Just a bit of brain stuff there. I do like a bit of brain stuff. Living in the past. Once you get past that, on occasion that you could be living in the past, we can see that there were red flags. There, maybe you chose to not take any notice because, interestingly, there comes a time when we have 20/20 vision. After the fact clarity, we may not have had enough information, time or experience to see what was actually going on. I was recalling a story of sorts that I'd heard, and it went something like this. Where you are asked to recall an old story of your life that still activates a reaction in you today. Something that triggers you today when you think about it. So essentially, the past is still present. I have used this to ask myself if there is still something I believe. I think then usually it's been there, done that. Then there's been there, stayed there, brought real estate there. Everyone has their own story, their experience, and in order to release the past, we have to recognise that we may be rehashing old scenes, and that's why it still feels fresh. I'm sure that all of us at some point have found ourselves reinforcing old patterns of reacting and may even, think it's normal, that it's the best you can arrive at, and that's not true. Rumination and regret spend a lot of time together. The body remembers all the unprocessed fear. For example, I found myself in an ugly situation. It was such a shock. I found that it was all I thought about. It got me so wound up, I would find myself talking to myself because I knew the person involved was never going to see my point of view and just kept lying. Had got right under my skin and I felt like my back was totally against the wall. I was having nightmares and I couldn't seem to get any of it out of my mind. Yet, another reminder that if you dip your toes in doubt, before you know it, you're drowning and nobody's coming to save you. I had to learn to save myself. I had to make better decisions. Started getting into meditations and listening to calming thought leaders as I was seeing these people every day at work. I felt like I couldn't get out of it. I didn't know I could. I was in so deep, and usually something major happens to wake you up, right? If you feel you're not taking any notice of subtle hints. I felt like I had no choice, and at that time I didn't realise that I did. I was very lost. There were other contributing factors, and then after it was all over, bit by bit, I was able to understand my motivations. I had hung in there for far too long. I kept thinking that things would just get better. This was a very conscious journey, very painful. I had to keep asking myself, what is it going to take for you to just let go? I cannot tell you how many times I asked myself that question. Turned out I had some important lessons to learn before I could embark on next steps. I think I was trying to bypass all the pain, but the good news is it doesn't actually take long. It is very much facing it, made it disappear pretty quickly. There is a lot of power in making and keeping your decisions strong. I think for me, I had never experienced anything like this before, and I had to because I wasn't making good decisions for myself. Suffice to say, it demanded great growth in my life as I had stopped demanding it of myself. I started reading and listening to every book I could get my hands on regarding codependency, narcissists, being brave, reconnecting with myself, self-awareness, and the list goes on. Every time I drove anywhere, I was listening to someone who lifted my spirits and made me rise above the pain. Turned out, most of it was not mine. Who knew? Ultimately, I had to look with honest eyes at all the years prior to the situation to understand how I got hooked in. And bit by bit, I could feel my own progress. I was new back then to the concept of red flags, and there were so many. It was mind-boggling. The biggest lesson that I took away from all of it was I had betrayed myself, and in the process allowed others to betray me. I had to extract myself, and I did. I do think that dropping into the past can be an absolutely marvellous thing. I had found an old cassette from the 1980s when I was singing in a rock band. Most of our songs were original, and it really was a fantastical time. As I listened to it, I closed my eyes and I was back. I was on stage, belting out the song behind the mic, pounding my upper thigh with my tambourine. It was a fantastic feeling. I pictured everyone that was there. I could hear all the talking and frenzied dancing. It was an era when dancing was very cool and very liberating. I was back at the venue, the lighting, the band going hard and consciously loving it. I could see my friends, my boyfriend, he played bass in the band. I stayed long enough to know I was back in my body and in my present life, but geez, it was great. If a genie had come through and said, "Would you like to go back for a night?" I would have said, "Hell yeah!" And I don't think there would be too many of us that would turn down that if that was something that could be so. Well, it looks like it's the end of another podcast. I just want to thank you so much for coming on by. It's always so lovely to see you. And I just want to let you know that, I've spoken about living in the past really briefly here, but I want you to know that I'm holding space for the people who have struggled or are struggling with this reality. And I'm certainly not saying that it's easy, but I did work it out over a period of time, applying certain things that really helped me, and I hope that you are doing the same. I see you and I commend you for putting yourself first. But it is the end of another podcast. Thank you again for coming by. Please say good day to the family and the dog for me, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.